Daily Broadside, day 542. I was out there talking to my neighbor on my patio 2 days ago, and he's from West Virginia, has lived an interesting life in West Virginia, because that's an interesting state. And I'm talking about like back in the hollers of West Virginia, not like in downtown Morgantown, I think it is. Anyway, he was talking about how he used to raise, and this dude has done everything. Like he's done it all. It's the stories he tells me just are hilarious. But he started telling me the other day about how he spent about 3 or 4 years raising roosters to do cockfighting. And I was like, you had my attention at cockfighting. And so I knew a cursory amount about cockfighting and all, and he starts telling me about how, you got to, how you train them up and you get them mean and all this stuff and everything. He's telling me about cocks and stags and cocks, and I'm like, what are we talking about? And it was, and I got to a point where I didn't talk for about 25 minutes, which is difficult for me. And he's just rambling on, and I'm just taking it all in. And he didn't talk about the same thing twice. And I'm like, how can it be this difficult to strap a knife to a rooster's leg, not feed it, and not let it have sex with anything, and then go put it in a pen with another rooster and let it kill it? Like, why did that take so long to describe? Makes no sense. I am thoroughly enjoying, although it is destroying this country quickly, I am thoroughly enjoying how all the people in these large cities are starting to rebel against, and admit that it is unsustainable to keep all these illegal immigrants in these countries or in these cities. Chicago's housing people in their airport, people just sleeping on the streets, people putting them up in schools and all this stuff. And it's unbelievable. They're just letting them go all over the place just for free, giving them money and, stipends and all this crap, Meanwhile, they can't help people in our own country. I will never understand that, how we can give money to this stupid Ukraine country, and yet we've got people on our own streets who are mentally ill and eating their own shit and, bogged out of their mind on drugs and everything. And I'll never understand that. But let's rustle up another $20 billion to give this dumbass country for this proxy war. But it is interesting watching all this stuff, and it will also be interesting. I wish the election was this year, because it would be interesting even more so. But it will be interesting to see what the problem turns into in the next little bit, because this election cycle is going to be interesting. And I say it every year. Every year I say, this is the most important election of our generation. I have said that since like Bush's first term. And every year I believe it. And then something else happens and it gets worse. And I'm like, nah, I thought that was bad last time. This is going to be a really important, like we've got to have somebody in the White House that has his head on his shoulders and blah, blah, blah. And it just keeps getting worse and keeps getting worse and keeps getting worse. It's like our country keeps holding my beer, just watch this. You thought that was shitty. Watch how we do it this time. I don't get it at all. And another thing I don't get is Frank Stallone. Could you imagine if like Muhammad Ali had a brother named Randy Ali, or Randy Clay? His mama called him Clay. I'm going to call him Clay. Randy Clay, right, is the younger brother of Muhammad Ali. And I don't know if Muhammad Ali's got a brother. I have no idea. Raised there in Louisville, Kentucky. And he goes on to boxing greatness, does all this great stuff for everybody. Everybody loves him and all this stuff. You could pick, all kinds of different people. Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson. Of course, even the Jackson brothers had some level of success, I guess, but not relative to what Michael did. But if you're Frank Stallone, like you've done nothing with your career, and Sly Stallone, as he's referred to in the biz and by his friends, is arguably one of the top money-making celebrity movie stars of all time. I mean, he's got to be like top 15, top 20, I would think, both with his staying power and just all the blockbusters that he's had over the years. Maybe he's not that high, but I mean, he's definitely up there in the conversation, right? Whether he's a good actor is a completely different story, but the fact that he's made all these movies that, have brought in a lot of money is something to be said. And yet Frank Stallone, he wrote a song for like Staying Alive, I think it was, just some cheesy song. And then he wrote a few little bits and pieces songs for some other movies, 3 or 4 of them for Rocky movies. But it was like, it wasn't the Survivor stuff. It wasn't the stuff you would know. It's like it was in like Rocky 1 or 2 where he's walking up and all them dudes are standing around a 50-gallon drum that's on fire, keeping their hands warm, and they're singing like doo-wop. Like Frank Stallone wrote that little ditty, that little 30-second song or whatever they sing. Whew, man, Frank has got to just like cry himself to sleep at night because of, I mean, his parents, they've got to be dead because, Sly's in his upper 70s. And I can't remember Frank. I think Frank's the younger brother. Either way, the parents have got to be dead, long since dead, right? But they had to have been disappointed on some level. Like Frank could be like the nicest, most genuine person on earth, but deep in their hearts, they're like, he just doesn't really hold a candle to Sylvester, and we don't know what to do for Frank because Frank can't get out of his own way. Frank doesn't really have any life skills other than writing a couple cheesy little songs that's his claim to fame. And I was watching something very recently where I think it was in Italy. Frank is singing his big hit from Staying Alive, I think it was. And Sly and his family are in attendance and they're watching. And, Stallone's sitting there listening to it. And he had this look on his face like he'd rather be at a million other places because he's probably heard this dumb song so many times, and it's like, God, Frank, you're the dumbest brother ever. I mean, at least like Ron Howard and like his uglier brother has, at least that dude's been in like a million movies and he's had some, mildly amusing parts here and there. But Frank's done nothing. Frank's just done nothing. And Frank looks just like Stallone. Like they're very similar to one another. So he can't escape it. Frank like walks out into public all the time. They're like, hey, Sly. And he's like, I'm Frank, and they're like, who? They don't even know Stallone's got a brother, but they're very similar looking, right? As opposed to like Brad Pitt's brother or brothers. He might have two, I don't remember, but they don't really look like anything like each other, There's lots of those, but Frank's pretty good facsimile of Stallone. Those are some very strict genes they had in that family, So I don't know what to say about that, man, but I feel bad for him. And I'm sure he's tried, but try as he may, it's just not turned into anything. And you got to ask yourself, like, at what point does Frank like, hey, Stallone, is there any way you could just float me like 60 grand so I could because what does he do? What does he do for money? I mean, you can't live off the royalties of one song from Staying Alive from 1984 or whatever the hell it was. I don't understand what you do to sustain yourself. And meanwhile, your brother, and maybe his brother bankrolls him. I don't know. But his brother's bringing in, $100 million a year or more. $100 million a picture. That Expendables, that can't be cheap. He's probably making a lot of cash on that. But at any rate, I don't know, man. I just I'd love for them to there be a documentary on some of these siblings who've tried and failed and live in the vast shadow of their more popular siblings. Much like Randy Ali. Randy Clay is my band, Sexual Chocolate. All right, giddy.